Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 12 of Echoes of Curiosity. As I sit here recording this, I'm dealing with a bit of GI discomfort. Nothing really serious, but enough to remind me that even now, almost 10 years to the day, I still live with some of the residual effects of that time in my life. And in a strange way, it's the perfect backdrop for today's episode. And this other backdrop, the one you see behind me, that's the room where I usually record these episodes, exactly as it looks today. I've decided to use it for this episode because, frankly, this hotel room is kind of boring. There are no books. I didn't expect Destiny to turn into 2 episodes, but some stories unfold on their own, organically, taking on their own rhythm. The moment when everything in my life felt steady and predictable changed drastically in March of 2016. That's when it was discovered that I had a perforation in my colon. After talking with my trusted doctor, someone I deeply respected, I agreed to undergo laparoscopic surgery to repair it. I thought it would be straightforward and routine. It wasn't. When I walked into the hospital that morning, I thought I knew exactly how the next few days would go. This was supposed to be routine. An elective surgery, the final step in a long battle with diverticulitis. I'd been dealing with diverticulitis since 2012, so I'd had it for a few years, but this perforation of the colon was serious business. I did all the consultations and signed the papers. I listened to the explanations and the expectations. And I felt prepared, really. I felt relatively calm. I felt that I was in control. Never a very good place to be, right? For a little while, everything went according to plan. The surgery took place on March 31st. I woke up groggy, but stable. The doctors were pleased. The nurses were all reassuring. And I can remember thinking, okay, this is it. This is a turning point. Life is about to get easier. But the body has its own language, and mine started speaking in ways that I didn't understand. Days passed, and something wasn't right. My bowels weren't waking up. I felt heavy, distended, extremely uncomfortable, and it was in a way that didn't match the script that was in my head. The doctors called it a prolonged, and I want to get this name right, a prolonged ileus, which is a fancy way of saying that my body wasn't cooperating. And then came a moment that everything changed. On April 7th, I became acutely ill. One of my surgical sites began draining, and not in a way anyone wanted to see. And suddenly that surgical recovery room was filled with urgency. Suddenly the voices started to sharpen and movements quickened. Before I could fully grasp what was going on, what was happening, I was being rushed into emergency surgery. There's one detail from that day that I didn't understand until much later. And it still feels like destiny to me. There was a nurse working on the surgical recovery unit who wasn't usually stationed there. His home base was the ICU. So this guy saw things and recognized patterns. I think he noticed the subtle signs that most people would miss. When he noticed and knew that something wasn't right, that's when I realized myself that it was going to be serious business. It wasn't a routine complication wrong. It was more like, this man is in danger wrong. And because of his experience, because this guy trusted what he saw, everything changed. He alerted the team, he pushed for action, and ultimately that's what led to my being rushed into the emergency surgery. I've thought about that moment so many times. How a single person in a place they weren't even supposed to be that day noticed what others didn't. You know, perforated colons have taken the lives of many people. During this time period, it actually happened very coincidentally that the actress Patty Duke died from a perforated colon. I could have easily been one of those people, but I wasn't, because he was there. This man whose name I can't even remember. The ICU has its own kind of time. It doesn't move in hours or days. It moves in waves. Moments of clarity, then long stretches of time where everything kind of dissolves into a gray fog. I remember trying to piece together where I was, what day it might be, whether it was morning or night. I remember sometimes I could tell by the light behind my eyelids, but most of the time I couldn't tell anything at all. I wasn't fully conscious, but I wasn't gone either. I was suspended, drifting, floating, trying to make it to the surface, but never quite getting there. In that strange in-between place, the world around me just kept going. Machines hummed. I could hear footsteps moving in and out of the room. Voices came and went like echoes in a long hallway. There were stretches in that ICU when I wasn't awake, but I wasn't gone either. I was just floating somewhere in between, unable to open my eyes. I wasn't able to speak, but I was still very much aware. At times I could hear everything. There was one point through that fog that I heard what I assume was a doctor say something to the effect of, well, dialysis will be an option for him. I'll tell you, that jolted me from the inside out. I knew what dialysis meant. I knew that kidneys don't fail in simple recoveries. I knew I was in real trouble. And I think the most terrifying part wasn't the word itself. It was the fact that I couldn't respond. I couldn't say, I'm here. I can hear you. I was trapped inside my own body, listening to people discuss whether my organs would keep working. That moment, that helplessness, that is something I will never forget. And somewhere in that same stretch of ICU, nights, days, etc., I had a moment of clarity. And I'll say one of the few. I realized that my phone was next to me. I am not sure how I managed it, but I reached for it, and I was able to dial the emergency number for my church. It was late, maybe close to 11. I was still attending Catholic Mass then. It grounded me. For one thing, it connected me to my mom, and it mattered to Edu. And in that moment, I needed someone, anyone, to see me spiritually, because I truly believed I might be dying. The only person on call was a deacon. And I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't what I got. He said a quick, perfunctory prayer, kind of the kind you could say while looking at your watch, maybe. And then he was gone. And somehow that made me feel worse. I had reached out from the edge, hoping for comfort, hoping for some presence, and instead I felt more alone than before I made that call. Eventually, the fog started to lift. It wasn't all at once. It was kind of more like a slow thaw. I realized I wasn't in the ICU anymore. I'd been moved back to the surgical recovery unit for the second time. But I was thankful to be alive. And I was very thankful that I wasn't on dialysis. But the truth is, I was in incredible pain. My body, it felt broken, hollowed out. And none of us, not even the doctors, knew yet that I would need another surgery. Those days were some of the hardest. I was frightened. I was weak. I guess I was more like a baby. And this is really where my family became my lifeline. Eduardo came every single day, sometimes staying through the night, sleeping in a chair, holding my hand when the pain spiked. My mom's visits, they were precious. I remember my hand in hers. There was a presence that was steady and familiar. And my sister Amy, oh my God, she helped the nurses clean me, wash me, and care for me in ways I never imagined needing. So yeah, these people, this family, their love held me together when my body couldn't. Recovery wasn't just painful, it was humbling. I couldn't eat solid food for pretty much the duration of the hospital stay. Even when I was feeling hunger, when my body was begging for something real, all I had was a feeding tube. I wasn't even allowed to drink water. The best I could do was suck on ice cubes and let them melt slowly in my mouth. It's strange how something so simple, a single ice cube, can feel like a gift when everything else is just out of reach. And the days were long. They were long. Long only the way that hospital days can be. I couldn't write in my journal. I couldn't focus on anything for more than a few seconds. The pain medications kept me in a kind of haze. Just enough to keep the pain from swallowing me whole, but not enough to make those hours pass by any faster. But even in that horrific haze, there were moments of grace. My students at the time, all adults from so many different countries and backgrounds, they sent me hundreds of handmade cards, thoughtful messages, careful handwriting, little notes of encouragement, written in English they had worked so hard to learn. Some wrote prayers. Some wrote memories from class. And some just wrote, "Teacher, get well soon." One of the nurses who had clearly had more than enough to do already took the time to tape those cards one by one around the window frame of my room. And that window, it didn't look out onto anything beautiful. It was just a parking lot. But through that window, I watched the seasons change. Winter to spring. Spring to almost summer. I watched the world move while I stayed still. And somehow that gave me hope. It reminded me that life was still happening. Time was still moving. And I was still here. I was still here to witness all of it. And so that's when I think the gratitude began to settle in. It's a quiet kind of gratitude that sits in your chest and warms you from the inside. Gratitude for breath. I was grateful for the ice cubes. And I was so grateful for those nurses who taped up messages from my students. And I was grateful for simple things. People who held my hand when I couldn't hold anything else. And ultimately, I was grateful for the simple, astonishing fact that I had survived something that could have taken me. When I look back on that time now, I can't help but get emotional. I don't see just the surgeries or the pain or even the fear. I see that thread that ran through all of it. That thread that kept pulling me. Destiny isn't loud. It doesn't shout or demand attention. Sometimes it's a nurse who notices something no one else sees. Other times it's a hand. It's a hand that you can't hold, but you can still feel. And at other times it's a window overlooking a parking lot where the seasons change while you lie still. At times, destiny is simply the fact that you are still here. When I walked out of that hospital, more like when I was wheeled out of that hospital, thinner, weaker, stitched together in more ways than one, I knew my life had changed. Not because of what I lost, but because of what I gained. A deeper gratitude, a quieter faith, and of course a clearer understanding that every breath, every moment, every connection, it's part of something larger and something that we can never fully see. No, destiny isn't loud. At times it whispers. Sometimes it waits. Destiny carries you when you can't carry yourself. And this was the chapter where destiny carried me. Thank you, my friends, for spending a few minutes of your day with me. It means so much to me. I hope you'll join me again for the next episode. And until then, keep that curiosity alive.